Hi, good morning, everybody. Um, it's 2 minutes past the hour, so we're going to get started. Welcome to our Responsible AI Institute virtual event on enterprise responsible AI programs. So we saw that the EU AI Act passed a vote in the EU Parliament last week. The US government is following through on the Trustworthy AI Executive Order. And then in the past few weeks, we have seen new models from Google, from OpenAI, from Anthropic, new partnerships, and lots of impressive new capabilities. But we have also seen increased cybersecurity risks and a string of high-profile incidents related to deepfakes. So what does this mean for organizations? We know that enterprise responsible AI programs require effective AI governance. We know we need tooling, a focus on training and culture. But the question is, what are the best ways for companies to organize these pieces of their responsible AI programs? And so to help us think through these issues, we have today an esteemed panel. We have Saima Shafiq from PNC Bank, who is also the latest advisor to the Responsible AI Institute. We have Alex Miller from Spark 92. We have Monika Viktorova from CEVA Logistics. And then we have Steve Mills from BCG. So before we get into the discussion, I'll just ask that our panelists introduce themselves in that order: Saima, Alex, Monika, and Steve. And then we can move to the discussion session.
Thanks, War. Good morning, everyone. My name is Saima Shafiq. I'm head of applied AI transformation at PNC Bank, one of the top few banks in the US, and I run the strategy and delivery of applying artificial intelligence across our business.
Hi, I'm Alex Miller. I'm leading the responsible AI work at Spark 92. We are a service arm born out of Cerberus Capital, and we are applying responsible AI across different industries and business services.
Hi, folks. My name is Monika Viktorova. I'm currently a product manager at CEVA Logistics, as Var said. I also work on responsible technology. In past life, I was also a consultant in responsible technology, so I've seen a bunch of transformation in the industry over the past couple of years. So really excited to chat through some of the insights today.
And hey, this is Steve Mills. I serve as the Chief AI Ethics Officer at Boston Consulting Group. So I oversee our own responsible AI program for all the AI we build on behalf of our clients. And then I also work with clients across industries to help them navigate these issues and design and put in place responsible AI programs.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Excited to dive into the discussion here. So the first set of the first discussion theme is on AI governance. And I'll come to you first, Steve. Many organizations find the task of AI governance to be daunting, and they don't know where to start. So where should they start?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think it can indeed seem daunting as you think about trying to create a comprehensive program with the overarching strategy and the governance and the processes and the tools, et cetera. Our research has shown it typically takes organizations 2 to 3 years to go from zero to a fully mature program. So I just want to stress it is a journey, and organizations should think about it that way. That said, I think it's really important to start right away, particularly now, given the queue up. There's a lot of value you can realize along that journey. It's not like you have to wait for the end state to realize value, and it can mature alongside your AI capabilities itself. So the two can work in tandem. So just as context, I want to say that I generally recommend 4 actions as leaders are thinking about this. The first is establishing leadership and resourcing. So leadership takes two real forms. One, putting in place an executive leader who's accountable for delivering the responsible AI program. And I think that anyone that's worked in a large organization knows if somebody is accountable, then things happen. So that's one piece of leadership. The other is putting in place a cross-functional team or council or committee, whatever you want to call it, that can help guide that. And that cross-disciplinary perspective is really important. The other point I made with my first item is funding it or resourcing it. I think that is so critical. Too many organizations say, this is really important and we're going to put somebody in charge, but then they don't give them the resources to actually do anything. So that's the first piece. The second piece is putting in place principles and policies. I always say these are necessary but not sufficient. So if you don't have them today, you should do that work and think about kind of what is your risk tolerance, what do you want to consider as high risk uses, et cetera. The third piece is linking all of this to your existing governance. I always say do not create anything net new unless you have to. Too often I see companies put in like shadow risk functions for AI rather than saying, how do I integrate AI risk management into my existing processes, into my existing development processes, my existing risk governance. And then the last piece is just start evaluating use cases. No use case should be built without you doing a look and thinking about risk and how you could potentially be impacting your customers in an unintended way, et cetera. So those to me are the 4 big steps organizations take to get started.
Great. And I think, yeah, I agree with all of that. Start now, be patient, and build on what you already have. So with that, I'll come to you, Monika. You have studied internal review processes in healthcare, in academic settings, and in technology companies. What characteristics have you found that good internal review processes share? And are there any lessons that we can kind of transfer over into responsible AI programs?
Thanks, Var. So actually, I want to thank Steve for kind of setting me up here, because I think a lot of what I'm going to say is going to echo what he's already mentioned. But internal review, just to take a step back, internal review really means being able to give go, no-go decisions. And there's a few really key characteristics that good internal review shares across the industries that use it. So the first one is impartiality, the second is accountability, and last is effective consultation. And Steve mentioned a couple of these. Impartiality is really important to minimize conflict of interest and also to ensure that your decision-making is based on kind of a rational scoping of the full risks and benefits of a project. So you really want to be able to say, take a step back and say, we're looking at the benefits, yes, the ROI, but also what are the actual risks here? Accountability is really important because internal review needs to have teeth. An internal review committee's recommendations need to be able to carry weight and ideally be able to go as far as giving a no-go decision if the risks are too high. And effective consultation really comes down to, do we have the right people around the table to evaluate the project with enough diversity of experience and expertise to ask the right questions and provide the right perspectives? So if you've set up a good internal review committee already, and I echo what Steve has said, I think there's a lot of repurposing that most organizations can do. So try not to start from scratch if you don't have to. But if you've already got a committee that can review your tech projects, you need to really make sure that it's asking the right questions. So this is really about evaluating across a couple of key dimensions. The first is technical feasibility, the second is ethics, and the last is resourcing. From a technical feasibility perspective, you do want to be able to assess whether a project is technically feasible, or at least there's a good reason to believe it will be if the project's cutting edge. From an ethics perspective, you should be able to answer the question, should we do this, and not just can we do this? So you need to be looking at some of the downstream impacts that are going to be affecting all different kinds of stakeholder groups, including potentially the public, and be able to say, does this align with our values? Does it make sense for us? Besides just the upside to this project, are we actually comfortable doing this? And finally, resourcing really looks at whether or not you have the right people to get the job done. So this is important for build and delivery from a technical perspective. Do you have the technical resources? But it's equally important for ethics and risk management. So do you actually have people who can contribute from an AI ethics perspective? Do you have people who can contribute from a legal perspective and also understand the technology landscape? In terms of what lessons responsible AI programs can kind of take away, what's really key is this approach has a lot of flexibility. It's adaptable to your existing structures, but what it comes down to is it gives you a 360-degree view of a project. So the idea is for it to give you better business decision-making. You want to make sure that an organization can decide if the project's worth the investment and if that investment is going to be protected long-term and de-risked. Internal review really should be a strategic bet that hedges against your risks while also making sure that you're aligning your projects to your company's values. if anybody's actually curious to know more, I did help Bar and the team at RAI help or put together a guide called Best Practices for AI Governance Structures, Executive Oversight, Internal Review. So feel free to head on over to RAI's LinkedIn page to take a look. That's just my quick plug for today. But back to you, Var.
Great. Thanks so much, Monika, and thanks for as Monika mentioned, with her help, we've made available the best practices guide to AI governance structures, and I would encourage everyone to download it from our LinkedIn page. So for next question is for Alex. You've worked with companies in a lot of different industries, some regulated, some less regulated. Does AI governance look different for organizations in different industries? And I'm thinking, what are some key differences between, let's say, healthcare, financial services, energy, or other industries?
Yeah. So it's a great question. I think AI governance can really vary significantly across different industries, but there is definitely some core practices and principles that are consistent throughout. Because when we think about responsible AI, we think about, how can we instill trust into our solutions and make sure that we can scale safely, right? And maintaining that trust in our solutions, right? So just as you said, different industries, due to the different regulatory frameworks, ethical considerations, data privacy concerns, and risk profiles inherent to each sector, it'll look a bit different. And actually, I have a background in neuroscience and public health, and so when I first started my consulting, career, I was focused heavily in healthcare, life sciences, which is where really got into responsible AI first, which was a natural regulated industry impacting people in society, right? So here, AI governance is really focused on patient privacy, things like HIPAA. We have data security, regulatory compliance. Of course, there will be interpretability and explainability of AI algorithms that are critical due to that impact on patient care and safety. In financial services, another heavily regulated industry, there are a lot of similarities between life science and financial services for this purpose, I think. And these are heavily influenced by things like GDPR and the EU, who is a trailblazer in some of these regulatory aspects. These, like both Monika and Steve pointed to, have robust risk frameworks that we can build off of. And here, I think the key is really, how do we incorporate very varied stakeholders that are part of the responsible AI landscape into a comprehensive framework to govern AI. Traditionally, things like model risk management, the standalone group, is not as diverse as such that responsible AI requires. So things like preventing algorithmic bias in lending decisions and ensuring fairness and transparency of AI-driven scoring models and guarding against fraud and market manipulation are other use cases where we might naturally think of responsible AI. But really, it's about uplifting the existing frameworks there. Energy as well, very similar. Often the goals here are around optimizing energy production or distribution and consumption while addressing environmental concerns and regulatory compliance. So we see a lot of similarities there as well. And where I think it gets more interesting is in these less regulated industries, such as retail, right? Where you're thinking maybe more on how do we target consumers in a more effective way, keeping in mind data privacy. So it's going to have to be an adaptable approach across industries. But again, these main core principles of explainability, data privacy, those are consistent regardless of the industry and the company.
Great. As we've also seen, in the financial services context, that teams like model risk management have a lot of expertise that they can now kind of disperse across the organization as responsible AI becomes a major priority. So just sticking with the financial services context, Saima, What kinds of support do AI delivery leaders value for maturing the AI practice at an organization?
Sure, War. So what I would say before I tell you what do they expect, let's take a look at what are they expected to do, right? It's important for us to understand what are they responsible for delivering, and then in turn, what are they asking the organization and overall, right, or the industry to provide better. So if you look at it, and I'm going to speak a lot from a technologist standpoint, right? AI delivery leaders who are supposed to be defining the strategy for their aligned business line, but whatever that is, right? Treasury, corporate, commercial, healthcare, retail, consumer, whatever it is. For their aligned business groups, the delivery leaders are expected to deliver effective AI solutions that solves business problems, right? But in a timely and efficient manner. That's what their core responsibilities are. What they need is the enterprise grade tools so they can build these solutions more effectively, but they can also customize them as needed. However, talking in the realm of governance, they need it done in a way that they can follow standard procedures that make the work repeatable for them when they are deploying something of a certain risk score, right? So what they need, what they expect from the organization, let's say, or what they can work, like Steve mentioned, right? Having an accountable party is important, but having the cross-company collaboration and some working groups that are accountable of defining the overall maturity, they need established frameworks for deploying these solutions. In this space, I think a lot also depends on the ability to efficiently test and verify the efficacy of the solution that they're building. For instance, how valid is the data being used, data risk kind of thing. Process, the MRMG, model risk management and governance that you mentioned. We would talk about the accuracy of the output, along with key factors in the generative AI landscape, like coherence, relevance, accuracy, performance, explainability, safety, and security, right? All of those things can be made simple if we establish a good collaborative framework, more structured, repeatable, but once again, customizable based on the risk scoring kind of use cases, right? That would add tremendous value. But we have to think beyond deployment, right? You deployed a solution and now you want to be able to continue to refine that. So an effective way of monitoring something through a standard tool would add tremendous value again as well. You want to have the findings real time such that you can fix by a new release or a quick hot fix if required, or even if a quick tweaking is required or fine tuning is required, in a way that you're not impacting your end users' performance or experience, right? So having an established monitoring framework that allows you to have alerts or watch closely on real-time basis for all of these good factors, ultimately really, saving from any bad taste in the mouth of end users. Now, we also know that organizations are looking to mature around different areas or different domains of AI, right? Generative AI is, of course, the most hot topic, but we still have the old-fashioned traditional, machine learning, document AI, conversational AI. A mix of, all of these different flavors require different flavors of the risk control around it as well. So once again, collectively working, like we heard Monika and Alex, on various degrees of risks, so you can establish a framework around deploying these tools and monitoring these tools, I think is what really makes these AI strategy and delivery leaders successful. And this has to be a function. It is a team play. It's team sports. It's not something that one leader, one line of business, one group can evolve. It has to be a team sport where everybody's partnering up and sharing the lessons across each other as they were defining scope. For instance, one group deployed something, the other group needs to know what went wrong, how did they overcome, so the other groups are not repeating the same kinds of mistakes. So the more they know the power of collaboration, the better they will get at it.
Thank you, Saima, and thanks to all of our panelists for your thoughts on the AI governance theme. I see we have some questions, and we'll kind of address questions at the end of the session. We'll leave 10 minutes or so for Q&A. So next, let's turn to the other key elements of responsible AI programs, which are frameworks, tools, and culture. So coming back to Monika, regulated industries already navigate a lot of complexity. we're now talking about kind of ensuring effective internal review for AI systems. How can small organizations with limited resources put in place internal review processes? It looks like Monica's dropped from the session. So do any of our other panelists have any thoughts on this question?
Well, I mean, I'm happy to share some thoughts, and then maybe others can weigh in, or Monica will rejoin. I don't think you need a huge team of responsible AI experts in order to put in place a review process. I think the trick here is ensuring you have multidisciplinary perspectives. That's one. And then two, really taking the perspective of, let's for a second just think about customer-facing applications, taking the perspective of who are the populations that will be directly or indirectly impacted by this, and what are the ways in which they could be impacted, both good and bad. And it allows you to start to have that lens of what's the net value we can realize from this as customers, as the organization, but also what are the risks, and can we appropriately mitigate them? So again, like I don't think you need huge resourcing to do that. And there's great resources at Responsible AI Institute, other places to help with this. So it's not like you need a massive resourcing footprint. It's more that you need to do that work and go through that process while you're considering a potential use case, and do it in design, not wait until you're about to launch something into production.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Steve. And smaller organizations, of course, it might be limited in terms of resourcing, but in terms of the multidisciplinary perspectives, people are more used to wearing different hats. And so that kind of agility and multidisciplinary perspective are strengths when it comes to responsible AI programs at smaller organizations. Monica, I see you've rejoined. Sorry for the technical difficulty there. The question is, that I had for you is, how can small organizations put in place internal review processes?
Yeah, absolutely. It's always toughest for small organizations and startups, ultimately, because some of those have 3-person teams, 5-person teams, right out of the gate, and they have an idea that they think is going to be a winner, that they want to really deploy and get out as quickly as possible onto market, and usually that's where it's trickiest, right? Internal review, that effective consultation piece of internal review really has to ensure that you actually have enough diversity of voices, enough diversity of perspectives to really be able to ask enough questions about a potential tool or a potential technology. And so I think startups and small organizations definitely struggle the most. With that being said, I think there are a ton of useful tools out there. So of course, organizations like RAI, but there's a whole constellation of organizations and nonprofits in the responsible AI space that provide free tooling, that provide tiered consultation services, that provide tools that can help some of these organizations start to do internal review in a way that's actually going to help them assess risk. And ultimately, I think going back to what Steve said at the beginning, you do have to make somebody accountable for it. Even in a small organization, someone has to be accountable for looking at how do we actually make sure that we've assessed the risk of this tool. I think we're well past the era where move fast, break things is a slogan that's accepted by the public or accepted by regulators. There's really no excuse, regardless of whether you've got a 3-person team or a 3,000-person team, not to be making sure that you are deploying technology in a responsible way.
Thanks, Monica, and I'm glad you mentioned the regulatory response. So we'll come to Steve. Steve, now that the AI Act has passed in the European Parliament, we're seeing renewed interest in AI standards and frameworks. So how should business leaders use AI standards and frameworks as they kind of put the pieces together for their responsible AI programs?
Yeah, I think standards seem like this hyper technical topic that most business leaders don't pay attention to. It tends to be the domain of folks like us on this call that are hyper passionate about these things. But they are important in that they provide a common sets of objectives, guidelines, specifications. In other words, they provide a view of what good looks like. In the case of AI, that includes how you manage and govern an AI within an organization. And so by following standards, business leaders can really be assured that the responsible AI program they design and put in place is following global best practices. I think there's the added benefit, particularly given the kind of cue into this question, policymakers and regulators will really look to standards to help them evaluate regulatory compliance. And so there's also this regulatory compliance angle that is really relevant for business leaders. And just as one example, there's ISO 42001, which is the standard for management of AI. So there are already some relevant AI standards. I fully expect there'll be more. You mentioned the AI Act. We expect the European standards organizations to adopt 42001 as the harmonized standard. So any organization putting in place a responsible AI program, I really encourage you to kind of get familiar with that standard as you're designing and implementing your program. It will become increasingly important. I'll do my shameless plug now, which is VAR and I have co-written a few pieces around governance and standards that you can get on the RAI Institute website. So if folks want to go deeper on this topic, there's some more information out there.
Great, and we'll share those links when we send out the video recording. And I would encourage all of our viewers to review those materials. So we'll move to tooling now. So Saima, with the rapid evolution of AI, do you see kind of any one tool emerging as a useful platform for all types of models? And if not, how many different tools should an organization expect to adopt for AI governance?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think that is particularly applicable to the smaller organizations that we were talking about earlier as well. From a larger organization standpoint, you have to think about all different variations of dimensions of artificial intelligence, right? So the answer is yes and no, because for the actual true application of artificial intelligence, there are so many dimensions, right? Or variations. For instance, you can be talking about just building models, or you can be talking about, as I said earlier, conversational AI experience, document AI, generative AI, and whatnot. So those will vary. Those tools will absolutely vary. And we all know there are thousands of tools just on generative AI alone, which is very recent, which is very new. Now, if we start thinking about the traditional AI domains, those numbers are even much larger, right? Because for past few decades, tools have been evolving. So yeah, there is absolutely no way that an enterprise grade maturity can be obtained by just having one tool that fits all. Then there is a flavor of domain-specific tools as well within the AI realm, right? For instance, I will say for document AI practice in the past, there were doc AI tools that would make it possible for you to extract trained models on any kind of document. But then there are niche, very specific, domain-specific, business-specific kind of documents that require some more specialized tools that are custom trained just on that kind of document, or the variety of those, right? But the yes part of my answer is from the governance and monitoring standpoint. Things, the benchmarks that RAI provides, for instance, the tooling like TrustWise offers, for instance, and there are many other governance tools that we see in the industry. These are the tools where monitoring in a more comprehensive and sophisticated manner that can really let you streamline as an organization all kinds of AI models that you may have built, agnostic of the tool that you use when you were building the solutions, right? That's where the one governance/monitoring kind of an application or one tool will help you big time. But for the actual application and implementation of your business application, you will need probably like a stitched solution that has multiple steps in the orchestration, right? Okay, you might be using certain custom models, some pre-trained models, some tool-based models, some just algorithmic models and whatnot. There can be a full stitched weaved solution that has a full choreography and orchestration around it, that where you are using multiple things from your toolbox. But ultimately, I think to close it all in a more streamlined manner, having a central comprehensive governance and monitoring tool that lets you watch for their, once again, their performance, the model performance, your monitoring around the responsibility of or the explainability of these aspects that you're deploying. That one tool will then come very handy to be considered mature and organized and regulated, right? And once again, all my answers are going to be coming more from the regulated industry standpoint, being in a financial service, right? So yeah, as I said, many tools you would need for deploying, but for watching, you could have one, because a lot of these that we have seen, the governance tools, they are technology agnostic. They can be plugged into your application that may be built on cloud, on-prem, using whatever tools from the toolbox in the industry.
Thanks, Saima. Those insights are very much aligned with what we have seen with the organizations we work with as well. And for more mature organizations that have already done kind of adopted digital ways of working, there's a natural understanding that in addition to tooling, in addition to governance, upskilling and workforce are really crucial elements of responsible AI programs. And when we say upskilling, what we're really trying to achieve is a culture of responsible AI that kind of permeates throughout an organization. So Alex, I'll pose this question to you. How can an organization drive cultural change to ensure that everyone is contributing to its responsible AI efforts?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think, not only establishing the culture, but also maintaining the culture is another piece that we'll think about. And I think, in order to maintain a culture, you have to be able to articulate it and then identify actions that reinforce it, right? So I think first of all, it does require a very strong and demonstrated commitment from senior leaders. And not just in a way where it's a campaign and we're lending our signature to it, but being shown to live and breathe and act in accordance with the company's principles around responsible AI. Something that's relevant too is, responsible AI needs to be positioned as not just a technology concern, but as a business concern that impacts everyone in the organization. So I think that should be very clear that we're, quickly approaching the point in which everyone in an organization has access to some sort of AI, right? It's no longer, I can tell they're doing some AI over there. It's anyone can, access it at their fingertips now. So therefore, like, all of those people need to fully understand how to use it safely and appropriately. Just as we're talking about tools, AI is a tool, and how can we use it appropriately, right? So it should be something that's not just rolled out broadly across the organization, not just to technology, but role specifically, right? And so we can think of different change management and awareness campaigns that mirror data literacy or data-centric culture campaigns, right? So they take a very broad view of what the responsibilities people have around data, and we can uplift these to include things like AI. And that will help every single person in the organization to understand, the obligation to how to execute and safeguard the use of AI technologies in their specific role. So what I would say for organizations that have an existing data literacy program is, one, expanding that to address responsible AI topics, and rejuvenating it to roll it out more broadly to the company-wide initiative. And organizations that don't have an existing data literacy program could create an awareness and change management campaign that combines both basic data literacy topics with responsible AI. Since those two are closely intertwined, it's helpful to address them holistically. And then I think it's important to have this be like a multi-channel approach. So when we talk about reinforcing this culture change, I think, after having mandatory training, right, we can activate the community through internal newsletters, webinars, institutions such as RAI. We can have guest speakers, and just these ongoing messaging and reinforcements throughout the organization to make it clear and widespread.
Great, thank you. So I'm excited to get to the Q&A, but before we go there, I have one question that I'd like kind of all of our panelists to chime in on. So we're seeing a rapid pace of technology change, technology adoption, policy response, best practices, and new research. The RAI Institute will be launching a member portal on April 2nd to help people at our member organizations stay on top of these developments. My question for the panelists is, how would you suggest that people stay on top of the latest developments in the rapidly changing AI, given the rapidly changing AI landscape? And I'll turn first to Saima.
Sure. I think the answer would probably slightly vary in terms of the level of commitment, the proactiveness that would be expected of a senior leader versus a citizen data scientist, for instance, right? Senior leaders definitely are expected to go out and do their study and be very regular and connected on the forums where they would get all of these new AI acts and policies that they have to incorporate for the organization. And then they would cross-collaborate. Internally, right? I mean, there are so many different groups within a large organization itself where AI delivery leader is just one part of the puzzle. There is the risk team, the compliance team, the legal team, the audit team, the governance team, right? All the data security team, the model risk management team. So all of those would be, talking to each other, sharing and doing the knowledge share, and then refining or enhancing their internal policies. But for a citizen data scientist who might be thinking, and I think I see a question similar to this on the chat as well, what should they be doing, right? I tell them there are two ways of looking at it. For somebody who does not have a responsibility from an organization's strategy standpoint, but still is playing a significant role in implementing AI solutions day in, day out, they should be doing it at two tracks. First track is, yes, just like somebody who likes to watch a football game or likes to watch recipes, they subscribe to these channels and they get alerted. So you want to subscribe to some really some interesting ones where you're getting bite-sized information, but on a very continuous speed. So you are not overlooking the important things that are happening. So that's the external standpoint. From an internal standpoint, plugging into those forums, you may not know, especially in large organizations. I mean, I know we work in a very large company, thousands of employees here, and it's hard for us to sometimes know what is the latest and greatest. What do I need to worry about, or what do others have already covered from me? So what is important and is probably going to be overlooked, if not emphasized enough, is, hey, you see a vendor tool or any new thing that is in your area, and it claims to have something as an embedded AI. This vendor tool that I've been using for years, all of a sudden now has magical AI powers. It's your responsibility to not just get excited about using that AI functionality, but also consulting with your vendor risk management tool, the third party and sourcing management, to make sure that you are being responsible in using the AI, functionality offered by these vendors, because you will see it proliferating. I can feel that every single tool that we have in-house for any organization, all of these companies are going to do some flavor of AI somewhere, and we don't want anything to just sneak in without being able to realize what are the risks associated with that, right? So as a citizen, it's important to plug into the external channels by subscribing somewhere or just reading where you can, but internally plugging into your internal forums where you can, and also being connected on, I found something new, but before I get excited about using it, let me go back and consult with my vendor partners, third party or sourcing partners, to make sure that you are actually having a blessing to move forward and use it. That's at a bare minimum. And then you should have lunch and learn forums. You should have forums where you are socializing what is possible, what you have seen, what you have learned. Do not just get to start using it without getting a blessing from your risk partners in the organization.
Great, thank you, Saima. Alex.
Right, yeah. So I think over time, naturally, in this role, I have grown a very multidisciplinary network, and it's something that I've noticed really helps me stay up to speed on terms of different news coming out and for artificial intelligence, right? Now, of course, there are newsletters that I read. I think in any given inbox, there's at least 2 daily where this is the news, and I get a quick bite-sized summary of everything I should know that day, which is definitely immensely helpful. That's actually how I found out about the EU AI Act that passed. I, woke up, checked my email. There's the news right there. It's as easy as that. But then I think more than anything, it's really interesting to see, journalism, law, these different academic research to industry, like these different components of where responsible AI is discussed and shaped. That's really what I like to read and to get my information around different views and opinions. And oftentimes I'll just find myself following people I even disagree with, just to see, why do I disagree with them on this piece of news regarding AI? How should we think about this going forward? And kind of investigating different views that are not just, who works in a services company, who works in a consulting company, who is in financial services, like really seeking out different forums and opinions around these issues, I think is incredibly important so that we don't fall into things like, groupthink.
Great. Thank you. Monika.
Thanks, Bar. Yeah, I think Saima and Alex have given some really excellent tips and really practical tips on how to both make sure you're signing up to the news and also to build that network that's also going to feed you a bunch of different perspectives. I think maybe what I'd like to add is I think it's important to have a proactive approach about diversifying the perspectives that you're hearing from, and not just newsletters. There's journalists that I always like to follow whose beat is technology foibles and tech ethics, like Casey Newton and Karen Howe, who are, they're reporting on what's going on in the global south and the way that extremely predatory practices around ML model content moderation are playing out. So it's important to also, you can look at more traditional sources of journalism, but also I would say there's a ton of advocacy organizations. The Algorithmic Justice League, I think, is one that I would highlight here. That uplift voices, especially marginalized ones that are not usually heard from these discussions, but are often people who are at the forefront of bearing, the brunt of harms from AI. So, making sure that in addition to a lot of kind of the latest and greatest in the newsletters and YouTube and LinkedIn that we're reading, that we're also trying to really, really proactively diversify our sources of news.
Great. And Steve.
Oh, the challenge when you go last is everyone took your answer. No, I think what everybody said is exactly right. I will, even though your question said besides from Responsible AI Institute, I will plug you all in that your monthly updates and your newsletters really are great. So I would point everyone there. I won't belabor the other points. Maybe what I'll add is I would just encourage folks to kind of network with peers outside your organizations as well. I know, and this is true whether you're, a data scientist or a senior executive. I have relationships with, my peer equivalents of chief AI ethics officers at big tech companies, at smaller organizations, at just kind of regular B2C and B2B type businesses, and just getting together on a regular basis to do nothing but compare notes on what we're hearing is hugely, hugely helpful. It can be as simple as, oh yeah, I met with regulator XYZ and the AI came up and we talked about this. Like that is useful information, just as sort of one example. So we always say network matters, but it's so critical here, both for information gathering and learning. I mean, this is still a relatively small community of practitioners in this space. I mean, leaps and bounds better than like 2016 when I was starting out. Like there's a lot of us now, but there's still not a ton. And so getting to be friends with folks that are thinking about these issues, that are operating in this space, just for mutual learning and mutual information sharing is so huge.
Great. Okay. Thanks to the panels for those thoughts. I think we can kind of move into the Q&A. There are a few questions in the chat. If anybody would like to come off mute, just raise your hand and we'll kind of call on you. You can come off mute. We'll ask that you kind of introduce yourself and let us know which of our panelists the question is directed to. I'll take some questions from the chat in the meantime. So we have a question from AltaML. We have seen a significant security overlap with frameworks like SOC 2 and ISO 27001, as well as those for risk security and privacy controls. How can we utilize these frameworks controls as compensatory controls? And how does utilizing these frameworks affect overall AI governance and compliance? So I'm happy to take an initial bite at this question, and then would love insights from our panelists as well. I think as Steve mentioned earlier, standards are a great source of what good looks like in a field that might be new or emerging. At the same time, kind of standards are also a field of their own, not for the faint-hearted. And so if your organization has the capacity to kind of align well with NIST frameworks or ISO standards, whether they're related to privacy, cybersecurity, or others, then it has somewhere inside of that organization the mapping muscle of this is how you map all the standards, and then this is also how you kind of glean out of that bunch which are the few that are relevant to this organization that we can kind of build a program around. And so we always encourage organizations to kind of find out where in their organization that muscle and ability exists, and then to use it when you're looking at these AI standards and frameworks. Yeah, so does anyone else on the panel have any thoughts on this question?
I would just echo what you said, and I think these frameworks really help us to explain responsible AI frameworks as well. Like I find myself comparing responsible AI to cybersecurity often, especially if someone is newer to the field. I think they're definitely controls that we can build off of, and a good basis for driving and understanding.
Yeah, and maybe I'll just add it to the point sort of I made earlier that there is this natural cross-functional overlap. As we think about an AI system, we have to think about the security of that system, which is this natural spilling into the cyber side as well. So, you may have cyber teams that are following those standards, and certainly we can learn from those standards, et cetera, but there's also relevancy to meet those standards. And so you can think about what are the processes they already have in place, and can we just build on top of that? Maybe there's some additional work we need to do specific to AI. That's great, but let's build on top of the processes they already have in place to meet those existing standards.
Yeah. And Steve, that actually reminds me, I saw another question about metrics, and oftentimes we'll find ourselves creating, specific KPIs for different projects. And I think what are standard metrics we can use? I'm often pulling inspiration from things like cybersecurity because of this natural overlap. Kind of like stealing another question from the chat, but would also love to hear, any KPIs or metrics you guys have created that have worked well.
Yeah, so we're when we launch our member portal on April 2nd, we're going to have kind of a list of metrics by grouped by our assessment types. So I would kind of encourage everybody to check those out. I have another question in the chat about actually, I don't know if this is a question. A critical factor that we often ignore is the environmental impact of generative AI as part of responsible AI. So I think, I think there's an increasing recognition of the environmental impact of these models, both as kind of a environmental issue and then also as kind of a cost and sustainability issue within organizations. And we're seeing the AI Act kind of require an environmental analysis. We're also seeing kind of increasing focus on this in the conversations around NIST and the conversations around the US National AI Research Resource. In addition to those, do our panelists have any kind of insights on how you can tie together the fields of responsible AI and the environmental impact of AI?
I can take an initial stab. Would love to hear further points of view, but I often find myself tying connections to ESG considerations. I think responsible AI can cover a wide breadth of parts of an organization, right? And not only is it regulatory risk and compliance or ESG, it's how do we do this really well? And so I think this is just one critical component of how can we do AI well and responsibly. And like Bar said, I think it is being brought to the forefront more and more often, and I don't think that will necessarily slow down. So I think it's definitely baking that in from both a cost and infrastructure optimization perspective, and then also, how can you improve sustainability in terms of efficiency, right?
Yep, I agree. I'll quickly add the factors around ESG that we would validate naturally become a point of question when we are even talking of the cost optimizations for the implementation as well, right? So I think it's just inherent they're going to be together. Whether the decision maker was doing it from a cost effectiveness standpoint, they're naturally, as they're doing that part, the ESG factors would be considered in naturally anyway. But yeah, I mean, important to consider for sure. And I think it will be considered more regularly for those who are using cloud-based services. For the on-prem ones, it's slightly different, but important factor to consider indeed.
I think there's also something to be said here for the fact that, a single organization approaches to something like this probably aren't going to be as effective as industry-wide regulation. I think the recognition of the amount of resources that server farms use is starting to really dawn on people. They're using more resources now than some medium-sized countries, which is just really, really wild to think about, when you think about that scope. And so I think organizations doing their best to try to minimize their footprint is great, but there really does need to be industry-wide regulation to start to minimize some of these impacts.
Great. I see a couple of hands up in the on the attendee list. So Khalid Yunus, you can come off mute.
Yeah, thank you very much for the nice discussion. I'm also involved in the standards in the IHE, HL7, and also with EECD regarding the new initiative for the terminology or lexicon for AI. But it is focused on healthcare. Now, given that you, Bara and Steve had worked on 42001, which is like a standard for management AI, that is not linked to a specific domain. So how do you see the value of having these certificates obtain compliance with the 42001 while the field is rapidly growing with LLMs and foundation models? And does it really cover all industries? What are your thoughts on that?
Great. Steve, do you have any initial thoughts, or would you like me to chime in first?
Go ahead.
Yeah. So ISO 42001 is kind of as you said, a general management system standard that applies to AI governance. We're still in kind of early days in the world of AI standardization. And so, both in kind of relevant laws, like the AI Act, as well as in the world of standards, we're going to see how these different requirements will apply to different industries and different kinds of products, and what the delta is in terms of what AI adds to these standards. So I think that if once there exists a fully fleshed out set of standards under ISO 42001, and we have a little bit of experience seeing what this element of this standard to this extent fulfills the requirements of the EU AI Act with regard to, let's say, a medical device, then we can be much more clear on exactly how that standard kind of helps you achieve conformity. But in kind of the meantime, these standards are really a key way for organizations to just see what good looks like and to get started with a common vocabulary and a common set of considerations around thinking about operationalizing AI systems.
And maybe the one piece I would add is I think we will start to see a drive towards product level standards. I still think they will be generalized. And so I do think there'll be a need to tailor to some degree to industries, which could be a bit of a combination of different industry groups coming together to try to do some tailoring. Maybe we'll get to a place where we think we need industry standards, but I think we're kind of far away. I think just getting product level standards would be a win. I also think what we will see is regulators in specific industries beginning to help shape how standards are interpreted or what they're looking for as they're evaluating compliance. And so that will also shape, I think, the industry specific approach to some extent.
Yeah, great point, and agreed. So the topic of our next virtual event will be harnessing generative AI's potential while mitigating specific risks, and we'll post details for that event on the Responsible AI Institute's LinkedIn page. So on behalf of the Institute, I'd like to thank our panelists for your insights, and to thank everybody who joined us today. So thanks everyone, and hope you have a great rest of your day.